Hi, this is the fifth and final video in a series of videos detailing the story of my expulsion from Columbia University for false accusations of the repeated rape of my best friend and first love. The explanation is being done in sequence, so if you haven't watched any of the previous videos, you may be a bit lost. Before I explain to you how I became privy to the corruption that underpins Columbia's Office of Gender-Based Misconduct, please allow me to thank you all for listening to me thus far. I know this explanation has been long-winded, convoluted, and full of stutters, and apparently a really weird accent that I just became abreast of after hearing myself recorded for the first time. I've got to work on that. Everyone's been telling me about it, but I was never aware of it myself until just today. Anyway, but I promise that I only aim to give the public as much knowledge to work with as possible. You humble me with your persistent attention to this. Now let's wrap this up, shall we? Whew. Immediately after I received notice of the sanctions that had been unfairly imposed on me, by the way, I did exactly what I swore I'd do as soon as the case was over. I went straight to the complainant. But not before going to John and Jane Doe first. Janice Doe was an outright traitor. She knew that she messed up. She knew that she had a huge hand in worsening the complainant's condition despite all logic, and she knew that she made an egregious error by convincing her to report me. But it wasn't that I was so furious about. Remember that it was me who initially told her that I molested the complainant in spring 2014. She didn't know what I meant. She assumed I did something horrible to her. I can't blame her for that. The complainant's mental illness created a huge chain of confusion in everyone. But it was the fact that she realized that she still she still defended her actions. She still pretended as if she did nothing wrong. She still testified against me. All of this to protect her ego. There was no risk to her at all. She wasn't in any trouble like I was. She would have just had to say that she made a mistake and I would have forgiven her. I loved her. As foolish as it sounds, I still love her. But clearly she did not have anywhere near as much love for me as I do for her. Because my reputation, my career, my health, my life, none of that mattered more than her ego. And anyone who would abandon their friends is worse than trash, in my opinion. I'm actually quoting, and rather I'm paraphrasing a quote from one of my favorite anime, but that's legitimately how I feel. Anyway, there was still hope with Jane Doe and John Doe, though. They legitimately did not know that the complainant was sick. They believed her because that's what you do when someone makes an accusation of rape. You believe them and support them wholeheartedly, blindly if necessary. I'm only now seeing the pitfalls of that. If I can get them to understand what's happening, I had to believe that they'd be willing to help. That's what I believed. Like always in this entire process, I was wrong. I told them everything via Facebook. I begged them to help me to fix the complaint by telling me if they knew of even one place or one time that they could tell me that they may know that the complainant made an accusation against me, so that I could go and tell the university so that they can get surveillance footage. That would be my newly presented evidence for the appeal that I was going to write. At this point, I still thought that perhaps the university just couldn't do so because maybe the complainant wasn't cooperating and maybe she just wasn't giving them anything straight. After all, her condition forces her to avoid anything that could possibly show her that her memories are not real. Well, the thing is, my friends Jane Doe and John Doe, they just ignored my pleas. They didn't want to get involved. No, that's not completely true. John Doe was willing to communicate with me enough to deflect any responsibility away from himself and say that the reason that he didn't reach out to me was because I didn't reach out to him. He wanted to assure me that he does care about me, but he sure as hell wasn't about to help or do anything to reverse the situation that he undoubtedly had a hand in making as the complainant's suite mate. I can only assume based on this cowardly denial, that he just didn't want me to end up retaliating against him, and that's why he said this. Jane Doe remained silent completely, though, because I'm sure she knew that she had too much to be ashamed of. Janice Doe used to tell me throughout the spring 2015 semester that the complainant had become so horribly damaged that she was sleeping in Jane Doe's room all the time. They became inseparable, as we used to be. Me and the complainant used to be, apparently. She took my place. By this time, I had pretty much read over every publication on false memory syndrome that Google had to offer, and one of the reasons that retractors, those who had this condition but after years finally realized that the memories that they had confabulated were untrue. Anyway, that's what they're called, retractors. I'm sorry. Anyway, one of the reasons that retractors often cite that they become so wrapped in the false memory syndrome belief system is that they can win the support and the empathy and the attention of people from whom they were lacking it before. The complainant did always say that she wanted more female friends, and this gave her a perfect way to do that. Jane Doe was supposedly one of the biggest proponents of reporting me. All the love I showed her in the past notwithstanding. I believe her shame kept her from doing anything to help me, and I hope that she lives with that because she deserves that much. But the problem with this is that I was left on my own to convince the complainant somehow that her memories were false. I tried everything I could think of. I tried sending her as many loving messages as possible, but she just blocked me at every turn that she got. I would circumvent the blocks and send her pictures of her old texts to me, the ones you can see in the documents, to try to convince her that she loved me just a few months before before I'm sending this to you. Just a few months ago, you were telling me about how you were so thankful for me being in your life. I sent her the timeline that you can also see in the description. For all those months that I was doing this, she was giving no response. It was only on New Year's Day of this year, 2016, that I told her that I know none of this is really working for her, apparently. Her mind, this condition is making her mind way too resistant to any of the evidence. Oh, I apologize. I'm belching. All the while, she was telling the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct to make me stop, but I didn't fear anything because they had already taken as much from me as they could. The degree didn't mean much to me. It was the complainant's mind, my best friend. They took that from me, and all I cared about was getting that back. I had no other way to provide or procure any evidence. The only thing that I could think of was to write an appeal thoroughly explaining everything that had transpired and submit the materials that my attorney advisor previously asked me to withhold. I had just spent the greater part of the year in a state of perpetual depression because of all of this, but I created the 17-page appeal. I clipped together all the text messages and the Facebook messages, etc. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I got it done. As I was working through it, and as I was putting all the details in order, I realized that this made absolutely no sense. Guys, I am gullible. I'm trusting, I confess to that. But as I was organizing all the details to write this appeal, I was realizing for the first time that this entire case had been a sham. They were never trying to protect anyone but themselves, and they don't care about who they hurt in order to do so. And when I realized that, I was no longer afraid to make demands of them. My resolve had been completely hardened. On January 26th, I submitted it to the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct, as well as the complainant herself. All the interactions have been curated for you all below so that you can look at them for yourselves. I don't want you to think that I'm being dishonest at all. But I'm about to detail everything right here in the video, so if you'd like to listen to me ramble more, then please go ahead. Just as I did earlier in this video series, I gave an oath to be completely honest, and understanding that anything I say can be used against me in a court of law. I told them essentially everything that I have just told you in this series of videos thus far, and demanded that they both repeal all the sanctions that were unjustly imposed upon me, and we recommend professionals that are trained to handle false memory syndromes to take care of the complainant and finally undo all the damage that this entire horrible affair has done to her mind. But soon after, on the same day, my attorney advisor gave me a call. He was doing everything that he could to dissuade me from making the appeal, saying that Columbia has no intention of relitigating this case. I wonder why. Me, being determined as ever and still a bit naive, I held fast to the belief that once they saw what I had to say for the first time, they would change their minds because the proof that the complainant was on drugs and was mentally ill was unassailable. But then he said something else that caught my attention. You see, I intended to send this appeal as well as a letter to the complainant's parents. They had to know about her condition if they were going to help her, right? I figured that if there was some way that I could gain their trust, even if they did think at the time that I raped their daughter, I had to take it. My attorney advisor said this to me. Okay, listen, Dexter. For all of her life, her parents may have looked at her as this innocent virginal girl. What if you send this to them and she can't handle their reaction and she kills herself? Okay, I admit that I hadn't considered that possibility at all. It seemed plausible considering her very volatile mental state. As determined as I was to get the complainant appropriate help that she needed from her parents, I must admit that this suggestion that my attorney advisor made me waver. I figured that if the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct does its job and recommends the help for the complainant, they can circumvent her parents, and the result is all the same. On that same day, though, the complainant actually responds to all of this. It's the first time in months that she actually talked to me. She remember that I also sent her the entire appeal. She begs me not to send any of this to her parents and says that she'll ask the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct to appeal all the sanctions. But oddly, she said that the reason that she didn't want her parents to know about this is because she didn't tell them about any of it. And that's completely contradictory to what Janice Doe told me back in March of 2015. She told me that the complainant told her parents all about this when she was hospitalized for septic shock back in spring break of 2015, remember? And at this time, I actually believed that I was the one who hospitalized her somehow. In fact, her parents were supposedly the biggest proponents of reporting me in the first place. Anyway, that in itself made it clear to me that her false memory syndrome is guiding all of her utterances. Everything that she's saying, everything that she's writing, it has a complete grip on her. But this is what proved it right here. That wasn't even the worst part. After untagging the investigators in the email thread that I'm going to show you, no, I'm going to give you the pictures, she tells me that she already told the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct everything all about my timeline. She goes on to say that this timeline is the very proof that her memories are not false. She says that my timeline showed her that her memories are not false. Yeah, guys, this is the hardcore proof that this woman is mentally ill. She accused me of some of the most ghastly, most I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking of an appropriate negative adjective that will convey the gravity of the accusations against me properly. She accused me of some really terrible things anyway, and absolutely none of that is depicted on the timeline at all. The timeline that she is now saying is the proof that her memories are not false because she already told the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct everything that I told her on the timeline. You guys, obviously this woman is just mentally ill. Her mind is actually twisting what she is seeing so it can show her, yes, he did say something that would incriminate him or implicate him in these really terrible rapes and assaults that I'm accusing him of. Her mind is absolute mush. Please try to just keep that in mind and be sensitive. But this is good. I showed this to the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct, and I begged them to consider the harm that their actions had done to her, which was evident from what she was saying right here about her already showing the office everything that I had written on that timeline, and I begged them to provide help for her. Then it happened. The next day, I received a letter in the mail reiterating that I am still a persona non grata on campus and that I am still to remain away from the campus under the threat of arrest. And when I saw this pathetic little attempt to save face in the light of the obvious truth that they knew that they were wrong, everything became so incredibly clear to me. They had all the proof that they needed to see that the complainant wasn't sane, that it was her therapist who helped destroy her, that all of these sanctions were unwarranted. I finally realized that these people did not give a damn about the truth or not. They didn't give a damn about the complainant. They didn't give a damn about me. In fact, they probably only sent my attorney advisor to stop me from sending all of those documents to her parents to hide the fact that I'm telling the truth and that they are corrupt and that they are wrong. I was done being everyone's puppet. I was done giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. I was done giving everyone my trust. I was absolutely livid, and I was going to make sure that each and every person who had had a hand in hurting me and the complainant was going to suffer for their actions. You can see the letters that I sent to everyone in the description below, but I'm just going to summarize the letter that I sent to the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct in a few lines right here. A. I don't acknowledge your sanctions worth a damn because you know as well as I do that I am innocent. B. You're a bunch of cowardly, racist bureaucrats hiding behind your power. You don't have a damn. I'm sorry, you don't have a damn. That's weird. You don't give a damn about your students at all, and I'm going to make sure that absolutely everyone knows. I'm going to make sure that Janice Doe and Jane Doe's errors are made public knowledge as well. I will reveal absolutely everyone's identities, including the complainants, because the only reason that I was hiding it in the first place was for her sake and not for mine, to protect her from people who wouldn't understand her mental illness. Finally, I told them that this would happen in 2 weeks if they did not repeal all of the sanctions unconditionally and they'd show me proof that they were recommending qualified help for the complainant. I have to admit that this felt good as hell to say, because it didn't matter, because like as you can no doubt surmise for yourselves, my demands were ignored, and I was told by Jerry Henry and the associate, like, who's the associate dean of student life, that all the sanctions will stand. But what was most interesting was the half-assed justification that they gave for upholding their decision. You can see in the documents below that she sent me this letter. It's in the documents. I'm sorry, I'm being repetitive. After consideration of the information you provided, and because the time for your appeal has been exhausted, your request to modify the sanctions in this matter is denied. You did not timely contest contest according to our policy, and as such, the outcome specified in your September 1, 2015 letter from Dean Crom will stand. Okay. You see, the sanction letter that Kristen, and when I say Kristen, I mean Dean Crom, but I'm not going to give her the respect of referring to her by her title as if she's my as if she's my superior, because she's clearly not my moral superior. Anyway, the letter that Kristen gave to me said that I had to complete this appeal in 5 days. The 17-page appeal that I did. Okay, first of all, you really just read the amounts of solid proof that your imposition of these sanctions were completely unjust in the first place, and then you have the gall to tell me that I didn't respond quickly enough? Second of all, you knew that I wouldn't be able to respond with new evidence in 5 days, especially considering that you didn't provide any of the evidence that I requested multiple times, and especially how much you damaged my mental state by imposing these sanctions in the first place. And third, and this is most important. This one's most obvious, actually. If this truly is the reason that you're declining this appeal, why is it that it took you 3 days to say it? If my appeal was never going to be considered because of this ridiculous 5-day policy, why did Jerry even accept them and tell me that she'd respond promptly upon reviewing them? I'll tell you why. It's because they needed time to come up with this tenuous 5-day excuse. They had no intention of admitting to their wrongdoings, because that would be acknowledging that this appeal would amount, mean acknowledging that what they did was wrong, and this appeal, like acknowledging the appeal, would amount to doing so. I'm sorry, that was a little confusing. Anyway, You should have heard Jerry the night I received the sanctions. I really wish I could have recorded the call for you all, but I can't do so legally. Apparently, you have to get their consent. And I'll just tell you what I'll just tell you guys what she said, and I will hope that you will take my word for it. When I asked for an explanation, all she did was completely reread the sheet as if I couldn't read, reiterating that I signed a form saying that I do not admit or deny responsibility for these allegations and that this would go immediately to the sanctions phase. You guys can read the entire thing in the description. Since I could see that she, and by extension all of her colleagues, had every intention of just hiding behind that RRF form that their administration had blackmailed me into signing in the first place by holding my degree as leverage, I simply decided to ask her just a few questions. One, did you read all the information that I sent you on false memory syndrome? And she says, I read everything that you sent to me. So I ask her, okay, do you think that I'm a rapist, Jerry? And at this point, she begins to prevaricate. She's like, Dexter, I just don't think that that's an appropriate question. What? How? I don't know how on earth it's not appropriate when you're trying to unjustly uphold an expulsion for rape accusations against me that you know are false. She just returns to rereading the document then, and at this point I hang up on her. She calls me back saying, I'm just worried about your mental health. Okay, and at this point I become furious because in September of 2015, scroll is not working, give me a second. Okay, goody. Alright, in September of 2015, I requested to my attorney advisor after the trauma of this travesty of a case that I be allowed to seek mental health services at Columbia Presbyterian. You see, I live in Washington Heights, so I can literally see this building from my apartment. Like, Columbia rejected my request to seek mental health treatment at these facilities based on the fact that I was a persona non grata on their property, and they were trying to uphold a sanction that they knew they never should have levied in the first place. I told Jerry that she didn't give a damn about my mental health in September. She didn't give a damn about my mental health when she and her cohorts were planning to sanction me in the first place. They definitely didn't give a damn about my mental health now. So I just hung up. All she likely cared about was the likelihood that I would expose her and her colleagues for her misdeeds. I'm not going to lie, I was absolutely furious with them. I never felt such tremendous hatred towards anyone before. That's when I began devising my plan about how I was going to publicize this case. I hope you guys actually view the pictures of the emails that I sent you, because if you do, you'll see that I definitely told them precisely what I was going to do. I just knew that I'd need more than 2 weeks for this very grandiose plan. Now that they knew what I was going to do, I thought I'd see if I could take a few comments from them. I contacted Jerry, Kristen, and Rob, asking them one specific question. What was my offense? The expulsion level offense that the sanctions form indicated that I was expelled for. I mean, Jerry's little notice did say that I should contact her if I had any questions, and I did so. But to that simple question, each of them gave no comment. Apparently, I wasn't allowed to know what my expulsion level offense was. But then again, it must be very hard for them to tell me what it was because there was none. Anyway, the next matter was to send all the materials to the complainant's family. Clearly, I was wrong about the university's willingness to help her, so I had to renege on my previous promise to refrain from sending it. Now, I realize that my attorney advisor probably just told me that the complainant could kill herself in response to her parents' reactions to these documents. So and it's probably just because he wanted to make sure that the university would be able to cover this up. I was going to make sure that her parents and her brother knew everything. So I sent hard copies of the entire appeal to their home address. I sent electronic copies to her brother as well. The complainant did not take well to this, of course. You can see it in my messages, but she basically claimed that I was harassing her entire family and ordered me not to contact her anymore, threatening to contact the appropriate authorities if I did. My audience, if you're believing what I'm saying so far, then you have no doubt discerned the strength of my resolve to see right done in this matter. All the threats of prison and death in the world could not stop me. But I will admit that what she was saying was heartbreaking. it was my confirmation that my best friend really is gone, and I'm the last person who can help her. She was something that reminded me too well of what she used to say to me. She said something like that. It was, if you love me, I'm sorry, if you truly love me, you will stop. That's what she said in the letter, her last letter to me. You can read it for yourselves. So many times she told me things along those lines like throughout the years. I know you love me because you always respect my wishes. If you love me, you just understand me. And there it was again. If you truly love me, you'd stop. She did it again after dozens of times, and I fell for this trick. And this is where it got us. This is where my conciliatory nature got us. I made her this way by blindly doing whatever she asked of me instead of doing what was best for her and letting her know that she had a problem. I let this problem consume her with my placidity. Not this time. You can read this in the letter that I sent to her parents, and I'm sorry, you can read. Ah, what? Darn it, I'm messing this up. And I was hoping that her parents might contact me because I sent her parents the letter. You can actually see it in the documents. I was fully prepared to talk to them and help them understand what happened. They never contacted me, but her brother did. When I sent him the materials over LinkedIn and Facebook, he gave me this response through LinkedIn. Thank you for the documents. It has given me some additional context surrounding the unfortunate events that occurred, and I hope to use that knowledge to help the complainant moving forward. I can see that you cared very much for her and did not mean to hurt her in all this. However, given her condition, I hope that you will be able to move on despite what has happened, and I sincerely wish you the best in your future endeavors. Now, I don't know if he's just trying to pacify me by assuring me that he'll do all that he can for the complainant, but it still meant a lot that he sent that. Who knows? Maybe he actually believes me and he's actually trying to help the complainant get better. My experience with all this and all these terrible people at Columbia is just making me somewhat untrusting. Speaking of which, in her last message to me, the complainant said something interesting. She said, GBM, that's the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct, GBM told me that the sanctions are not from anything I told them, but from what you wrote to them. But from what you wrote to them. So what I wrote to them is what caused the sanctions to be levied, not anything that she said. That's what Office of Gender-Based Misconduct said to her. And it confirmed my suspicions. When the complainant tried to have all the sanctions lifted to prevent me from sending all this to her parents, the office hid behind this form that they practically forced me to sign. All because they knew that lifting these sanctions would admit that they did wrong. They have absolutely no honor whatsoever. It is absolutely infuriating. They really dare to tell this woman that the sanctions were entirely the product of me signing this form, a form that they bullied me into signing, a form that they used in the first place to appease her, though they knew that none of the sanctions were warranted. I swear, there is a special place in hell for people like them. Not that I believe in hell. I, I let them know that they're monsters and that I have every intention of letting them know it. So Deidre Fuchs? Fox. So Deidre Fox, the public security lady on campus, sends me another notification that what I'm doing is harassment and that I'm no longer to contact anyone about this case. Okay, so at this point, what I wanted to do is tell them to take their sanctions, their precious respondent response form, and their hiding behind, and all their demands, fold it 5 ways and shove it up their corrupt asses. But that would be very undignified, so I sent them a final notification reiterating that I do not acknowledge their sanctions and that I'm going public with this case as soon as I am ready because their behavior is absolutely unacceptable. This was my final correspondence with them before the letter I sent them on September 5th. You can see both of them, if you'd like, in the description. I've undoubtedly bored you enough with all of this, but I'm going to spend the last few minutes of this video series briefly talking about my thought process for publicizing this case. Just a few more minutes, I promise. First, while I was completely bluffing about revealing the complainant's identity to the public, I would never do anything to cause her any harm under any circumstances. I was ready completely to smear Jane Doe, Janice Doe, and John Doe's reputations after all that they had done to me. I suffered every day because they were just horrible friends and because I chose to love people who didn't love me. But I was slowly having realizations within the last 7 months, and I was thinking very deeply about why that would be a bad idea. At first, the idea of not doing anything to make them suffer for their misdeeds was torturing me every night. I was dreaming about it. It was giving me nightmares. It was making me cry every night. They got to live completely happy lives and just forget about everything and walk away from all this and just pretend that the complainant is well, even though they know she's not, and let me just suffer. It took me about all of 3 months to even consider not revealing their identities. And even then, I only considered it because I was worried that if I reveal their identities, then it would be very easy for other people to use, say, Facebook or Instagram pictures to eventually make the connection to the complainant, and then they'd know her identity. And like I said, I am not allowing anybody to be able to identify the complainant no matter what. But this wasn't the major reason that you all don't know who they are right now. It was because I wanted to talk to you guys about a way to make peace. As you may have seen in the intro video, as like much of the spiel about feminism not being used as a tool for revenge, but for like maintaining equality between the sexes, that was what I thought was the goal here. How on earth was I going to come to you guys, and let hatred guide me towards a course of action that was so clearly just an act of vengeance, and expect you guys to acknowledge any credence in those words that we should choose equality and not revenge? I'm not going to lie, I still bear a great deal of latent anger towards them, but I know that any attack on them would just create more conflict. I'm really hoping that my example might be used for anyone who may have been hurt either by sexual assault or by false accusations. Trite as it may be to say, hate never heals. It tends to make things a lot worse. That's what I've learned from all this. My first experience with the feeling of hatred. Also, you'll see in the documents that I include in Colombia's oh my gosh, why am I stuttering on this? You'll see in the documents that I listed towards Colombia that I call Colombia's administration and my friends racist several times out of anger. I don't want to apologize for those words at all. This is indeed as much of a gender equality issue as it is a race issue. They tend to oversect a lot, actually. My friends, especially Jane Doe, who has repeatedly referred to me as her only black friend, could not have possibly come to this conclusion that I was a rapist without the biases about not just men, but black men. And I'm certain that even though there was so much to suggest that I was innocent, Colombia's Office of Gender-Based Misconduct knew that it was a far safer bet to simply appease the complainant because they knew that she would be able to garner sympathy more easily if she, in her broken mental state, complained about being raped to the public, especially given the strength of the political climate. They knew that it would be nearly impossible for me, a black male, to be able to convince many that I was being falsely accused of rape because the masses' biases towards us is as violent, hypersexual criminals. They are actually counting on you to not listen to a word that I say. However, while I want for the ramifications of ignoring these very real race-related problems to be considered, I do not hope that they divide us further. I'm very sure that there are many of you who have interests in gender equality or men's rights, but deny the importance of race issues, or maybe vice versa. Uh, I do hope that if you've watched this video so far, that you'll at least give thoughts to the overlap between the two. Now, finally, I would be remiss not to mention this. I, while I am innocent of anything that meets a reasonable definition of sexual assault, while I've never touched the complainant in any way that was unlike anything in any normal sexual relationship, while this whole situation would not have ever happened if the complainant wasn't psychotic, I must confess that I did touch the complainant without her prior consent willingly. I did this completely within a sound mind. I never admitted to myself that the complainant was mentally ill, but I did see that the complainant was having some issue with sex. Yes, she was equivocating a lot, but I let my manly pride get in the way of making what could have been the best decision and just asking her permission each and every time because I honestly wasn't sure about what she wanted, and that would be the right thing to do if I'm not sure. It would have been the best way to make sure that no non sexual contact would have happened at all. Yeah, it's insulting for someone who's been in a repeated, like, who's been in a relationship with you and who has repeatedly told you that she loves and trusts you and who has offered sex to you dozens of times and who has welcomed your touches dozens and dozens of times right before telling, like, for her to go and tell me never to ever touch her again, right before telling me that she likes that I touch her, and right after telling me that she likes when I touch her. Like I said, going back and forth. That I knew that the right thing to do would have been just to ask permission each and every time. Yes, I may have felt unmanly because she always told me I was too irrational and too gentle, and I was afraid that asking permission would turn her off, and that being assertive with what I wanted, just gently, but like would be the most manly way to like approach her. But at the end of the day, I did deliberately choose to touch her without asking her permission beforehand. That is a mistake. I do not think that it constitutes sexual assault at all, and I know now that her pain wasn't caused by this at all. I know that this would have been completely normal under any normal circumstances. But if you guys do think that I am guilty of some sort of crime, I encourage you to draw up a petition and send it to the Manhattan DA. I still live in Manhattan. You can have me arrested. I will face responsibility. I'm sorry. I will take responsibility for this and take whatever consequences you guys see fit. All I'm saying is that I could have done better in the situation. While I do think that there are several feminists that are taking this campaign against sexual assault a little too far, I do think that they are onto something with this idea of a consent culture. I don't think that we should label people who make perfectly natural approaches to their sexual partners sexual assailants. Because that would mean that every single person who's ever been in a relationship is a sexual assailant. I don't think we should write these rules into law where they're so stringent that they can be used to dominate and abuse men, like what happened to me. But we do need to start raising the standard for consent just a bit more. Making sure that people always feel safe and happy before, during, and after sexual encounters would be perfect. But we're not. Oh, sorry. But we are humans we're humans, so we are fallible by nature. And whether it's a guy who just doesn't communicate enough or a girl who gets drunk at a party who forms false memories will never be perfect. But it is definitely worthwhile to strive towards that because I do think eventually we can be. And if we keep trying and experimenting over time, maybe one day we'll actually make consent sexy. And this would ultimately provide for a lot more safety and happy experiences all around. It's not impossible for us to grow towards that. Please remember that we're nowhere near there yet, though. We need to protect each other on the way up, and we need to do everything that we can to only hold accountable the few people who actually have bad intentions and actually do malicious things to people, like actual rapists or the bureaucrats at Columbia. Uh, as I said in the first video, we must do everything that we can to try to understand each other because we're on the same side. Oh, okay. You made it to the end. Gosh, I would like to thank you guys again. I am just so moved. None of you guys were under any obligation to watch any of this, but you did more for me than many of my friends did. Many people who I used to consider my best friends. You listened to my side. You allowed me to defend myself. I cannot ask you guys to believe what I'm saying at all. You have to do so at your own discretion. But I truly I can only express my heartfelt thanks that you guys would listen to even one word of this. And if you guys have any questions for me, please feel free to comment or text. Or if you truly find it necessary, call me. I'll do my best to be an open book. Hopefully, you can all help me to make this first step in ending all of this conflict and ensuring that campuses are safer for everybody. Thank you so much. Goodbye.